Welcome back to the STLK and the UTA Cougars podcast. I'm joined by Steve. I'm Paul. BYU loses to the best team in the nation, Houston, 75-68. And then we beat Texas by 12 in a game that was much bigger than that. Let's talk Houston first. Tell me about it.
The best team in the country, for whatever reason, the AP poll, I think, still has them ranked at 4th, which makes no sense. They're number one in the net, number one in the Ken Palm, number one in like every metric that matters. But man, what an environment at the Marriott Center. Unfortunately, we didn't sell it out. I still think BYU tickets is overshooting with the prices, but we had a good crowd there. It was the loudest I think I've ever heard the Marriott Center since probably the COVID year.
Really?
When we just had an all-star team with a bunch of seniors, and then the season, got canceled because of COVID. Mm-hmm. But we beat Gonzaga that year, the number one team, and man, that game was exciting. But yeah, the Marriott Center was lit up. It was really loud, really fun. There were some spells during the game where it looked like, okay, Houston's going to pull away here. And we just kept fighting back.
It's something I didn't expect from BYU. Like, I know this team's great, and I've been on the record saying this team's great a handful of times. I thought they were going to pull away. I have that much respect for Houston. I was like, we can't hang with them. And every few minutes, we just claw back into this thing. And it wasn't like clawing back within 7. It was like clawing back to like a 1-point lead or down 2. Like, it was a really close game, all game.
It really was a back and forth game, and BYU played really well. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a good game. Yeah. I think, man, I would love to have the game back just because of how many threes we shot. I think we ended up shooting 38 threes. Mark Pope has been on the record saying that he wants the team to shoot 35, which is so many. But we just took so many contested threes in that game. Jackson Robinson was not on, to say the least. There was a stretch where he shot 3 threes in 4 possessions, and the third one was from about 29 feet, and he airballed it, and it was just like, man, like I think I tweeted out that I want my wife to love me the way Jackson Robinson loves a contested deep three. That was a great tweet. But man, he just has the ultimate green light, and credit to him, we'll talk about this in a minute, but he came back against Texas and really started to develop the game more than shooting threes. But man, if you have that game back, and maybe you take it from 38 threes, we take it down to 31 or 32 threes, we get a couple better looks from 2. I really think that BYU wins that game.
So we actually shot the same amount of 2-point field goals as Houston did. Both shot 59. BYU obviously shot 15 more threes, but the big difference here is the foul line. BYU only shot 10 free throws all game.
It's been a theme in Big 12 play. We only have one game where we have more free throws than the opponent, and we're, I think, 7 games in now. Even against Texas, right? It was they had 16, I believe we had 15, but it seems like every game we cannot get to the free throw line the way the other teams do. And I think part of that is just the style of play, right? When you're shooting a lot of threes, you're not drawing contact at the rim. But yeah, it's something that Mark Pope has mentioned that they've been working on as a team, guarding without fouling and also drawing contact. So it was good to see them come a little bit closer to parity against Texas on Saturday. But overall, yeah, the free throws really hurt us. That's for sure.
So I'm going to have Connor pull up either a video or a picture here. BYU's down either 1 or 2 at this point.
It's got to be Trevin's shot.
It's Trevin's shot. Wide open. I'm not sure. There's a lapse in the defense, and Trevin has a chance to essentially win the game for BYU.
It's a tie game at this point, right?
It's a tie. It's either down 1 or tie. I
think we're down 1. You're right.
Yeah, and there's 30-something seconds left, maybe 42. If he makes the shot, 1, the roof is exploding off of this building. And 2, BYU has a lead. And it just back rims. He's our best shooter on the team, in my opinion. Just got excited.
Like if we sit here before the game and say, okay, we have a chance to win the game with less than a minute, have an open 3 from one of the best shooters in the nation, I think anybody takes that. But what nobody's talking about is that BYU gets the rebound. BYU gets the offensive reason. I believe it's downhaul. He ends up on the ground, on the floor in front of our bench. And I've watched the replay back and stuff. It's hard to see. It's hard to see Dallin. I've heard anecdotally that he was yelling timeout. It's hard to get a timeout when you're on the ground, right? And guys are jumping on you and the whole stadium's erupting. But man, I know coaches can't call timeouts when it's a live ball scenario, but I would love if we're right in front of our bench, if everybody's just screaming timeout at that referee. If we get a timeout down 1, again, I don't set up the scenario, maybe we miss the shot again, but man, we had every chance that we would have asked for to win that game. And unfortunately, we went the last 2 minutes and 15 seconds of the game without scoring. They finished the game, I think, on a 9-0 run, something like that, and ended up beating us by like 7.
Yeah, it was 68-66 at one point, and the final score was 75-68. It's so hard because if you have the ball and you're yelling timeout, you run the issue of like the ref probably doesn't hear me, especially in that situation. But if you like try to like gesture timeout, you're giving up the ball, you're handing it away, and at that point you can't call a timeout. So it's a really tough situation. Again, if everybody's yelling it, you probably get it. Tough way to lose that game. You ready?
It seems like, well, I was just gonna say on the timeout thing, it seems like it's really swung. And I know they implemented a new rule in the NBA. They probably brought it to college a couple years ago, where you have to be like 2 feet planted in the playing area to get a timeout.
Yeah,
so I feel like it used to be like 10, 15 years ago, like a guy's falling out of bounds,
and he could call it,
and the ref sees him start to like move his hands together, like timeout. You know, it's pretty ridiculous. But now it seems like it's flown the other way, especially in college basketball. It seems like the ref just just love the jump ball. You know, they just love to get the jump ball going. And so it seems like any scenario where it's in question, then they're always giving them the jump. So yeah, tough way to lose. We shot 29% from three. And that's a theme in games we lose this year is we just have a really poor 3-point shooting percentage. But man, it was a fun game, fun environment to be there. And if we can play with the best team in the country, you know, we've been saying all year, we can play with anyone.
Yeah. So that's where I wanted to go next. It was almost like a good loss, at least for like the morale of the team. Again, I hate these like moral victories, but like for BYU to like not only hang with them, but have a chance to win the game like we just talked about, you have to feel pretty good about yourself going into this next game. And that's what they did. They came out against Texas. It was a hot start by Texas. I kind of got worried. I jumped into the game about 2 minutes late and I said, oh no, like, because it's so hard as a player to get up for this Houston game, lose it, and then stay at home and then get up for a Texas team who's not nearly as good as Houston. And that's what I worried BYU would do. But obviously they turned around. They ended up winning this game by 12. Like I said earlier, it felt bigger all game. You were there though. Were you there at this Texas game?
Yeah, I was there.
Compare the environments for me.
I think the Houston game was a tad more louder and passionate, but we had more to cheer for at the Texas game. Like you said, it was a slow start. It was kind of back and forth for the first 15-ish minutes of the game, and then BYU pulled away and then kind of gave up a lead at the end of half. We seem to have a hard time finishing games, finishing halves. Texas had a 10-3 run to finish the first half. Thank you. Yeah. And same thing happened against Texas Tech, right? We finished the first half. They get a 6-0 run. We finished the game on a 7-0 run. The Houston game we just talked about, they finished the game on a 7-0 run. And so we seem to have a hard time closing these games. But man, it was a fun environment. It was a sellout crowd. It was a Saturday afternoon. The first time BYU has played at noon in decades. Mm-hmm. Doesn't happen very often. The game was on ESPN2, which was cool. So a lot of hype. We played Texas, which is like to step back and think, like we played Texas, the guys that Taysom's jumping over in this picture, and you know the team with the biggest budget in college sports and a team with their own television network and one of the most iconic teams ever. And we played them in a conference game and we beat them.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I don't know if you saw my tweet, but the ESPN BPI predictor, it was like 80-20 for BYU. And I tweeted, I was like, regardless of the sport, like this is a dream. This is awesome. This is crazy. Back to your light bulb moment. BYU was up 41-31 going into halftime, or what you would think would be going into halftime with 2 minutes and 28 seconds left.
Up 10.
Yes.
And that was following one of the best stretches of basketball I've seen BYU play this year.
Yep.
There's a 3-minute stretch where I think we went on like an 11-2 run or something.
Yes.
Beautiful basketball in that stretch. But then
before Spencer Johnson's made layup, the little buzzer beater he had, it was 42-41 with 20 seconds left. And that just can't happen. You get in a tournament setting and you're letting guys go on 10-15-0 runs, you're going to lose a lot of games that way. Like we're good enough to hang with people for 36 minutes of the game, but if we give up a 4-minute stretch to a team that we're better than, this is how teams lose games in March. Luckily, we didn't lose this game. But it's not a strong sign for us.
Yeah, I really think the tell for this BYU team is shot selection. Mm-hmm. And when we're settling for contested threes, that's when I think Mark Pope has to use his timeouts. There's been some criticism because we have given up big runs this year. Mm-hmm. I've seen some stats at the runs that we've given up 11-0 runs, 15-1 runs, and it seems like Mark Pope is often very hesitant to use his timeouts. And you get a lot in college, right? You get a lot of breaks. Every 4 minutes there's a TV timeout, and so I can understand you want to save them for the end of the game. But yeah, the tell for this BYU team is when we start to take contested threes with at least 10 or more seconds on the shot clock. We could get a better look, but we start to settle, and then we let up a little bit on the defensive end, and we see these runs to end the half.
It's so easy to take a contested three, not a contested one, but when you've been making them all game and you know you're a good shooter.
And when your coach wants you taking 35 a game.
We're only at 13 and there's 2 minutes left in the half. Start hucking. The next thing, Jackson Robinson shot 10 threes against Houston and made 2 of them. He shot 2 threes against Texas. You tweeted out something, I think, about his 2-point shot selection.
I love him from 2.
He's incredible. He's an all-NBA player when he's shooting non-threes. Yeah.
And Mark Pope talked about it after the Houston game. It's a delicate balance. You know this as a basketball player, right? When your coach wants to give you the green light and wants you to be confident in the shots that you're taking, but when you take 10 threes and you only make 2 of them against Houston, like I said, he took 3 threes in a 4-possession span. You have to get to your guy and help him understand that we need better shots while not hurting his confidence, right? And so a big shout out to Jackson Robinson coming back, having an excellent game. If he didn't lead the team in points, he was right there. He had 17 points. He played 36 minutes, which is a season high for him. Went 8 for 11 from field goal, like you said. He also came in with 3 blocks.
Yeah.
I thought he did have some impressive individual defensive moments. He only took 2 threes. Yeah. He did take 3 threes, but one of them got waved off for a moving screen. That was an air ball. So I think that was probably good for his confidence to get that one out of the way.
I missed that.
But just the swing from Tuesday to Saturday with him taking 10 threes and just, breaking so many of them to really being deliberate about getting to the mid-range where he does have that really nice jump shot and getting to the rim. I thought that was huge for him.
7 for 9 from the 2-point range. Like, that's incredible. If he could do that once every 3 games, he's going to get drafted. And in some round.
And BYU's second in the nation in 2-point field goal percentage.
65 against Texas, is that right?
Yeah, and they're on the season, I believe they're 68 or 69%.
That's really high. On the season, they're 68% from 2?
I'm confusing 2 things. Richie Saunders is number 2 in the nation at 69.8%. BYU's mid-60s. I had it written down somewhere, but
still really high.
And that helps out, right? When he takes such a volume of threes, and we've seen a lot of the backdoor cuts, that starts to open up the floor. But yeah, I loved the focus on Saturday getting the rim. We only took maybe 17 3-pointers.
Yeah.
I have it written down somewhere. And so there's just a big focus on getting the ball to the rim, getting the ball to the mid-range, getting the ball to Foose as well. Yeah.
Also had 16 points that game, Foose did, with Waterman and Jackson having 17. BYU has fallen in the net for the first time in 3 or 4 weeks. We are down to 6 now, and that's after UConn just murdered Xavier, which is a quad 2 team. They're not a terrible team. I watched them a handful of times this year. UConn jumped BYU. It's not that BYU did anything terrible, but they did drop to 6. Still at 9 in the Ken Palm. That really hasn't moved in a while either. BYU and UConn, believe it or not, the 2 teams that I just mentioned, are the only 2 teams in the Ken Palm top 25 in all 4 of these categories. Offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, effective field goal percentage, and effective field goal percentage defense. UConn won the national title last year. BYU obviously is going to be at least in the Final Four this year, as we've discussed a handful of times. Does that mean much right now?
I got to recover from these outlandish statements. It means something. When you think about BYU this year, you think about an offensive team.
Yeah.
But what continually is overlooked is their defense. Right, number 1 or top 10. What'd you say? Top 10?
The only team in the top 25 of the Ken Palm
of both categories.
To be, yep, exactly.
So yeah, all that to say that BYU is an incredible defensive team. We talk about the offense. BYU scored 68 points against Houston, a team that's number 1 in scoring defense in the nation, as well as, like I said, every other category that matters. But for some reason, still number 4 to the pollsters. Doesn't make any sense. But Houston averages giving up only 51 points a game to their opponents. BYU scored 68, right?
Yeah.
So an impressive offensive output. But the defense, I think, is really where BYU is hanging in these games. We talk about, it looked like Houston was going to pull away at a couple moments, but BYU continued to claw back. A lot of passion, and I've noticed that the last couple games, BYU started to mix up their defenses a lot. We've seen them in zone, we've seen them in man, we've seen them in some other, like there's this interesting 1-3-1 zone where they play, where the middle guy is like switching out, and we've seen them press. And so I think to BYU's advantage, they've been mixing up their defenses, and they've become quite the balanced team.
Shout out to Greg Wrubell. He's incredible with these stats. I just remembered this stat as you were talking. 3 games ago, BYU scored 87 points against Iowa State, who's now ranked 12, by the way, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. That's crazy. 87 points. That's the most their coach has given up since he became a head coach at Iowa State. They scored 68, tied for most against Houston this year. And then they scored 84 against Texas, which was the most Texas has given up since they played LSU 6 weeks ago. BYU can score against the best teams in the nation. To your point, though, their defense is just as good.
They've been a very balanced team. I want to mention a couple other things. Foose, we talked about. It's so good to have him back.
Yeah, man.
He's been playing a few minutes here and there in the games. The Houston game, it was interesting. They didn't play him the whole game. We were down 8 or 9 with 10 minutes left, and Pope rode him all the way through the finish, and he was huge for us. But he seemed back to full strength on Saturday. He shot 6 for 7 from the field. I think more impressive than that, he was 4 for 4 from the free throw line.
Yes.
6 rebounds and 16 points, as you mentioned. When he gets in the paint, and he can get in the paint at will, it doesn't matter who you put on. They put 7-footers on him, they put beefy guys on him, they put guys that look like Chris Jones on him, and he can get his feet in the paint. And when he gets to that right-hand little hook shot, he's deadly. He made a left-handed one on Saturday, which is fun to see. He doesn't often do that, but man, it's good to have Foose back. Incredible footwork, really, really strong guy.
Great to have him back. Again, to your point, when BYU, with how many shooters they have, if they can have an inside presence as consistent as he is, this team's going to go really far, probably to the Final Four. And
let me mention this as well. Everybody on the team, but Ali Khalifa, he had a rough day shooting. 8 assists.
8 assists,
Give him credit. That was impressive with only 2 turnovers, still leading the nation assist to turnover ratio. He just throws the back door every time now. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's open. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's open. He just throws it. But it's fun to watch him. He had a rough day. I think he was 1 for 5 overall, 0 for 3 from 3. But everybody else on the team shot over 50% from the field.
Yeah.
And so just really efficient. And I think it was probably our best game of the year. The Iowa State game was pretty impressive. But this Saturday against Texas might have been our best showing of the year.
To your point about that backdoor, it is so hard to defend. Like, even if you know it's coming, like if a good passer like Khalifa can put it in the right spot as a defender, it's like hitting by your foot. Like, you're either kicking it, which like your natural instinct isn't to do, or like your guy's getting a layup. And to your point, he does it a lot.
And with the motion offense that BYU runs, like they're running their guys off screens, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And for 9 times in a row, Spencer Johnson's coming off the top side of the screen, right? And then the one side he gives you a jab and goes back door, and it's like, man, like I tried, coach. And I'm sure they're sitting in these film, these opponents are like, watch the back door when Khalifa has the ball, right? And it's so much easier said than done, especially with BYU being one of the top 3-point shooting teams in the nation. You got to get over the screen to guard the 3, but then when they go back door, it's opened up. And so BYU's so balanced. Like we talked about offense and defense, but the balance that they're coming out with their offensive play calling and getting the ball to the 3-point line, getting open looks, getting the ball into Foose, getting some of the mid range. We have one of the best assist teams in the nation. It's fun to watch.
For a team that's trying to shoot 35 threes a game, I am shocked with how balanced their offense is. Granted, against Houston, like we've said, 38 kind of felt like a lot. But again, to your point, they're really balanced. The Big 12 has 8 teams in the top 25 right now, which is the most it's had all year, tied the most it's had all year. Houston's at 4. They're the best team in the nation. Am I wrong? Like, why are they at 4?
Like I said, I don't understand the pollsters and where they come up with these. Oklahoma has been... They were ranked 11th last week, and they were like top 40 in the Ken Palm. And so it's like a lot of these are head scratchers. BYU dropped in the AP poll this week when we had a chance to beat the number 1 team in the nation, and then smacked Texas, who's been ranked a lot of the year.
Yeah.
Right? A really good team. And so
I don't get it.
A lot of these don't make sense. BYU still hasn't had an 0-2 week in the Big 12. We've split. It's been the worst that we've had. We're going 1-1. I trust Ken Palm in the net way more than I trust the pollsters. You can't watch every game, right? So these guys are looking at scores and they're just assuming things. And I think there are a lot of eyes on the Big 12, but you can't watch every game. And so I'm sure they're just looking at scores and moving people up and down based off where they were the previous week. And maybe at some point we need a reset where it's like, all right, re-rank everybody now, right?
Because everyone's at 0. Tell us where it's at.
Right, some of these don't make sense.
Kansas is 8. I get it. Iowa State at 12. I don't love it.
Kansas is still overrated.
Yeah, I agree. Not as overrated as Iowa State.
Yes. Kansas still has Bill Self, one of the best college basketball coaches of all time. I wouldn't count them out when it comes to tournament time. They're going to figure it out. But, they lost to West Virginia on the road, who's like over 100 in the Ken Palm. And that's a team I think that has some overrating going on.
Texas Tech 15. Don't love it. They had to shoot out of their minds at home to beat BYU.
Right.
And I'm not saying BYU is like the barometer to judge everyone off of, but BYU's ranked 22. So how do you if you're just sitting down saying why is Texas Tech 7 points better than BYU? I'm not sure anyone has a good answer. Baylor at 18. I think they're highly overrated. I think BYU is going to crush them when they play them at home, if I'm being honest.
Agreed.
BYU comes in at 22, like I said. Oklahoma 23. That sounds a lot better. They just got trampled at home. I thought that game was at Texas.
They were up 16 against Texas and let Texas come all the way back and beat them in their place.
Yeah, a top 25 team doesn't do that typically. And then TCU at 25. That was a triple overtime game, I believe, 2 nights ago.
Exciting one. TCU's a good team.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Big 12 is impressive. I was just going to mention that it's really hard to win on the road in the Big 12. We'll put the graphic up here with all the rankings. BYU is kind of middle of the pack right now at 3 and 4. There's kind of a log jam there in the middle of the conference. Oklahoma State got their first win in conference play on Saturday against West Virginia, who's BYU's next opponent. But you look at these away records. There's only one team in the Big 12 with a winning record away from home, and that's Texas Tech. They're 2-1. Right, that's small sample size, only 3 games so far. And so it's hard to win on the road in the conference. BYU is going to be traveling a long way all the way out to Morgantown, trying to beat a team that's at the bottom of the conference. But anytime you go that far and you play in an environment like West Virginia has, they do have a good environment there in Morgantown. It's a tough place to win. If
you told me 6 weeks ago that Texas Tech would be the number 1 team in the Big 12 right now,
surprise.
Yeah, it'd be a surprise, and that Iowa State would be number 2. I wouldn't believe you. Again, to your point, Kansas is 4-3 in the conference. They've only lost 1 time out of conference, but 3 conference losses. I'm not sure how you rank number 8. West Virginia 2-5, who we do go travel and see. The newcomers in the conference this year are playing pretty great.
Not bad at all.
They're combined 14-14 right now. Houston does have 5 of those wins. BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF all are at 3-4 right now, which I feel like is higher than all of them expected to be.
And I think Cincinnati's had a surprisingly good year. Yeah. Much like BYU has.
They're somewhere in the Ken Palm, right? I know they're pretty high. I want to say top 20. That might be crazy.
I got 2 more things to cover from Saturday.
Okay.
Cosmos stunt. Did you see it?
I think one-handed thing? You did.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So Cosmos stacked 3. We'll try to get a clip up. he stacked 3 like tables on top of each other, and he put his feet towards the ceiling, and so he's doing a handstand, and he puts one arm up on the table and pushes his entire body weight up with one arm. And I could not believe this. He gets to the third one, right? He's done this 3 times. He's got to be exhausted. And the first try, he doesn't get up. The second try, he doesn't get up. The third try, he doesn't get up. And the Marriott Center just gets louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
Like, there's no chance, right? You try 3 times to do something. Like you're benching, and you try 3 times. Like, you're done.
The fourth time, you can't do it.
There's no chance.
No.
And somehow, it's just, I don't know, the basketball gods, the mascot gods, whatever gods, just gave it to Cosmo, and he pushed all the way up, and I was incredibly impressed. So Cosmo continues to be the best mascot in the nation. One other thing I want to mention from the game, they showed Sean Bradley. He was there in his chair. As you know, he got hit by a car. It was biking, had an accident. Yeah, he's still the career leader in blocks per game at BYU.
Wow.
Conjo just enlightened us that he was drafted on his mission, number 2 overall by the Sixers.
Really?
Had a great NBA career. I just want to mention a couple things about him. Apparently, he talked to the team, and Coach Pope told a story post-game that I thought was pretty cool. When Coach Pope went to Washington to play basketball and then transferred to Kentucky, where he's team captain and won the Natty. But when he was at Washington, he said he felt he was really lost as a young member of the church trying to make his way in this weird new environment in Washington. And Sean Bradley sent him a 7-page letter.
Wow.
And he said he doesn't remember a lot about the content of the letter, but just thinking like Sean Bradley, this guy that's in the NBA, one of the best players, and this guy that's kind of a legend in the church basketball, church athletics sector, spent the time to write him a 7-page letter. And he just talked about how impressed he was by that, and how much it meant to him that Sean Bradley even knew who he was, let alone spent all the time to write him this letter. And so Sean Bradley came into the locker room and talked to the guys, and I'm sure inspired them that way. One of the best to ever do it at BYU. Great NBA career. One other story that Mark Pope told post game was that Sean Bradley used to, at away games, he would buy out a section or 2 of the away arena and give away tickets to the local branches and wards to come watch play.
That's incredible.
And then after the game was over, in the arena, they would do a fireside in the arena. And Mark Pope was invited to the fireside when he eventually made it to the NBA, and he told a couple fun stories about the firesides there. So cool to have Sean Bradley in the building. They showed him the Jumbotron. A lot of people were tearing up. What an inspiring story. So cool to have legends like that back in Provo.
Yeah, Sean Bradley is incredible. That's an interesting thing about Mark Pope. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, Mark Pope, not a BYU guy until he was kind of adopted in the coaching tree. But Sean Bradley was looking out for some of his own. Cool.
Here's my hot take of the week. Because
Final Four odds?
No, those aren't that hot. I mean, it's kind of expected. But this is my hot take. I think the next 7 games, I think BYU has a very good chance of going 6-7. At West Virginia.
6-1 or 6-7?
I'm sorry, 6-1 in their next 7. I appreciate that. Thank you. 6 out of 7. At West Virginia, at Oklahoma, who's overrated, I think. Home against Kansas State, who's actually really good. Home against UCF, that should be a blowout. At Oklahoma State, should be a blowout. Home against Baylor, I think Baylor's overrated. Call me crazy. I think we win that game. Home against at Kansas State, I think we drop somewhere in there. I think we drop a game. It's really hard to go 7-0. But I think we're going to win a handful of those games. I don't think it's too crazy to predict 6-1 over the next 7. BYU has had, up to this point, the second hardest schedule in the Big 12. Now it really starts to ease up. 6 of BYU's first 7 Big 12 games were against Ken Palm top 36 teams. We have 11 games left, and only 5 of the 11 are against top 36. So the schedule really does start to ease up. Again, it is hard to win on the road in the Big 12. We talked about that. But like you mentioned, West Virginia 135th in Ken Palm. BYU's a 12-point favorite in the Ken Palm and an 85% chance to win. Now, they did beat Kansas and Morgantown, so we'll have to be careful there. Oklahoma's ranked number 28th in the Ken Palm, but that's a game that I think we can win. Like you said, if we do drop one, that's probably it. Kansas State at home, we should win that game. They're a good team, 65th in the Ken Palm. UCF at home, 72nd in the Ken Palm. Then we go to Stillwater. Oklahoma State just barely got their first win of the Big 12 against West Virginia, and they're ranked 118th in the Ken Palm, while BYU's at 9. And so I don't think you're crazy to say that. I think we have a good stretch upcoming. BYU's going to start climbing the rankings, and it should be a fun time here through February. Off camera, you said something to me. 88% chance of making the tournament right now.
That's what Ken Palm has BYU pegged at. Yeah, 88%.
That feels low. Like, I'm not like trying to make a joke here. Like, that actually feels pretty low, does it not? Like 9 out of 10 times we finish this season, and we're just dropping all of these games. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, it doesn't seem. We would have to really implode, I feel, to not make it.
Like, we would have to go like 2-5 in this next stretch to not make the tournament.
It seems like at this point, it feels like BYU is a lock to win the tournament. So, I mean, 88%, I would be curious to see how they rank like other teams. Like, is Houston like low 90s still? Or are they like 100%ers? I don't know.
Yeah, because it's like, I feel like the Big 12 is going to have at least 6 or 7 teams in it. Yeah, I don't see how you take that many Big 12 teams and BYU doesn't fall
we have
inside.
8 teams in the top 25 poll right now. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's gonna
and
be
at
at
that
least
point, yeah, exactly. So maybe 1 or 2 teams implode, and they're just saying it might be one of these 7 or 8 teams that are in the AP top 25. 17-1, by the way, to answer your question. Final 4 odds for BYU.
We've fallen off slightly.
$45 wins you $750. I think it's worth it. I mean, it's almost a lock in my opinion. Anything else you want to touch on? I mean,
just want to clarify what I said earlier. I messed up the stat, but BYU is number 3 in the nation in 2-point percentage, shooting 60% from the field on shots that aren't 3-pointers. Another indication that maybe we should take a little bit less than 38 threes per game. And then shout out to Richie Saunders. This is an interesting stat from Cougar Stats. I like his Twitter. You should follow him. Follow him on X. He's an incredibly efficient player. He has a lot of energy. He plays great on defense, but he has made 69.8% of his 2-point shots this season. There's only one player shorter than Richie who has a better shooting percentage from 2. Richie's 6'5". One of the things I wanted to mention about this as well, besides being incredibly efficient, they often put him at the 4, and he's guarding guys that are 6'9", 6'10".
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how short he was. He's only 6'5". And so for him to be that good of a defender against guys that are, he's giving up 5-6 inches, massively impressive. He's my wife's favorite player now.
I don't blame her. She's got great taste and great players. The only game this week is West Virginia, not nationally televised. That's going to be on ESPN Plus again. BYU actually has 0 nationally televised games left.
Really?
The game against Baylor is showing nothing. Just like there's no ESPN, no Big 12. And I'm curious if that's a flex spot for BYU to get on ESPN. Other than that, though, every single game has either Big 12/ESPN Plus on there.
And it's hard to complain. We talked about this last week because you can watch every BYU game. You pay the $12 a month to get ESPN Plus. Mm-hmm. But in the West Coast Conference, because we're in the Pacific time zone, we got a lot of those 8 and 8:30 slots on ESPN2. Mm-hmm. And it was cool to see some of the better commentators on a game. And it's surprising with how well we're playing and how good the conference is. I mean, BYU at Texas was a great game, ESPN2. We had BYU, Houston BYU, we talked about it. Wasn't on TV. It didn't make sense. Crazy. And BYU has some big games upcoming, a ranked matchup against Oklahoma, a ranked matchup against Baylor, and still not getting him on TV. So interesting that way.
We'll be back here next week talking about the West Virginia game, and then UCF and Oklahoma State the week after. Oklahoma and Kansas State next week, which is going to be very fun. That's been it for the STLK and the UTA Cougs podcast. I'm Paul. This is Steve. Thanks for listening.